Aloha, this is Lahaina Lee. Hey, welcome to our series on owning property on Maui. We're on the topic of owning condos on Maui. Now, most of us who own condos on Maui either live in them, rent them out, short-term or long-term, or simply hold them as second homes and sometimes, loan them to friends and family. In the first episode, we highlighted the 4 things you need to know before investing in a condo on Maui. Pop quiz, anybody remember what those were? I hate pop quizzes. Well, number 1 is understanding your homeowners association. The main thing I'm looking for is no surprises, or at least as few surprises as possible. So let's go. First thing is your association fees. In Hawaii, every condominium development must have an AOAO or AOUO, whatever name they go by. As an owner, you can think of it as being a shareholder in a business because that's what it really is. The association is in the business of managing the assets and operations of the property. Sidebar, rental management is not a function of the association. As an owner, you get a vote in how the complex is managed, and you can be as passive or as active as you choose to be. So congrats, you are officially a business person. And just remember, your partners in this venture include everyone else who's an owner at your complex, from the retired surfer downstairs to the guy upstairs who insists on vacuuming at midnight, which, by the way, is probably a violation of the house rules. So try to remember that the association is a business, and your monthly fees are the primary revenue stream. Sometimes they're the only revenue stream. Obviously, you'll want to understand where your money is going and what you're getting in return. It's kind of like going to a fancy restaurant and looking at the menu. You want to know what's included and what's extra, and what, if anything, is going to be a separate cost coming out of your pocket. So what do your association fees cover? At a bare minimum, associations maintain the condo's common elements, like the grounds, the pool, the building exterior, and property insurance, not including the interior of your condo. That's separate, and we can discuss that later. If your association is set up to be kind of a no-frills property, that might be all they cover, and in that case, your fees should be less than a resort condo. On the flip side, some associations, especially those that were built for and allow short-term rental, go all out full resort, and they cover everything from electricity to Wi-Fi to cable TV. Yeah, what? Yeah, there's still cable TV. If you own in one of those complexes, and of course you have air conditioning, you definitely want to know if electricity is covered. Otherwise, some of your guests, especially those from cooler climates, they like to open up those doors and let the warm air in and turn the air conditioning on at the same time. You'll wind up sweating your electric bill more than anything else. Well, the budget is being set by the board of directors, and they may or may not have outside help from a third party that has experience in managing associations. And so what I think of as the operating budget is equal to the cost of day-to-day operations of the property, employees, water, insurance, those kinds of things, roughly divided by the number of units. And that's roughly because it's really based on a different formula, but that's pretty close. So aside from operating expenses, the daily expenses of running the company, you also have capital expenses. Now, some associations will break those out into 2 separate budgets, and some associations just have them all in one budget, but they're different line items. And you can actually look at those and see what's budgeted for capital improvements and maintenance for the year. And that leads us into reserves. You kind of want to know what the reserves are, okay? Reserves, by the way, are for capital projects. They're not for future payroll or any kind of future operating expenses. And does the complex that you're considering at least have what appears to be adequate reserves? At this point, you might be asking yourself, well, how do I know that? Good question. First, ask your realtor. Those of us who specialize in condos tend to know a lot about the complexes in the area, and if they have favorites, they probably know the good, the bad, and even some of the juicy gossip about the building. Even with that, you can't count on the realtor for everything. A lot of what you're going to find out about the association, the fees, and everything else are going to be during what we call due diligence. And we'll dive into that in another subsequent episode. But just at a high level, once you're under contract, you have an accepted offer, and you're in escrow, the seller is contractually obligated to hand off a virtual stack of documents. Nobody does paper anymore. It'll include budgets, meeting minutes, financial statements, and more. Now you have a set time to review all of this data with your accountant, your attorney, your realtor, whoever you want to have to help you review the material. The amount of time you get to review all of this information, well, that time frame is negotiable. But when we represent a buyer, we usually request that sellers get the documents to you within 5 to 10 days. We usually ask for another 5 to 10 days for you to review the documents. And if you're not a fan of spreadsheets, now is a good time to call in your CPA. There can be a lot to look for, but the first thing I'm looking at are the financials, the profit and loss statement, the balance sheets, the reserves. And again, if numbers aren't your thing, get your CPA to help you out. And watch out for red flags. I mean, we've seen P&Ls with sections that were whited out. Also, we've seen some very old ones. That is the exception. That's not the norm. Usually the documents we get are in good order and they're complete. You know, when we look at the budget, we're just trying to see if it looks reasonable. And then try to compare the reserve study to the actual reserves. Now remember, the reserve study basically outlines the useful life of big ticket items like roofs, pools, and other items that are meant to last for a long time. This study helps to determine how much money should be stashed into the reserves, because if your reserves aren't adequate, you could be in for a nasty surprise. Now, inquiring minds might be asking, well, how are reserves set? Well, in Hawaii, generally a condo association is required to set their reserves based on one of two methods. The first is the 50% method. So that basically says the association has to have 50% of the amount for capital projects that are going to be spent to be in reserves. Sounds pretty straightforward. But it's sort of based on, well, it's not sort of, it's based on the condominium reserve study, which is spread out over 30 years. So it can get a little complicated. The second and really most common method that I see is the cash method. So that means the association has enough cash set aside to handle next year's capital expenses. I mean, that sounds pretty straightforward too, right? Well, it is, but some condominium complexes in the past have been a bit under-reserved, and that resulted in some surprises. Okay, at this point, if you're thinking, that's it, I'm running for the hills, well, you shouldn't. But you should be carefully doing your due diligence. A lack of reserves or deferred maintenance can, lead to a special assessment. And what is a special assessment? Special assessments. Well, they are special. They're kind of the financial curveball of condominium ownership. These extra fees pop up when reserves aren't enough to cover repairs, and sometimes there are some unexpected repairs or replacements. Your board of directors, other owners just like you, are responsible for determining if a special assessment is required, and if so, how much will that be, how will it be charged, and how is it going to be collected. A special assessment can range from a few $100 to tens of thousands of dollars. They can be lump sum, so you owe it all at once, or they could be paid in monthly installments, or some combination of the two. In 2024, a lot of condos faced assessments after property insurance premiums skyrocketed 200 to 700%. Yeah, those numbers are real. Insurance is not a typical reserve item, but reserves can be used in emergency situations. What's more common are something like plumbing assessments, or, we're seeing a fair number of those in some of the older complexes now. And I want to add that the places where we're seeing the plumbing assessments, those are not complete surprises. They could probably see those coming for a few years and they're getting ready for it. Also, if you're eyeing a foreclosure condo in a complex that has several foreclosures, there are some other factors that you want to consider, but we'll save that roller coaster for another article. So for now, that's our dive into all things association. But there always is more, and things changed. So stay tuned for news. Hope you got a few takeaways from that. And as always, we love hearing from you. So drop your comments or questions into the section below. And if owning a property on Maui interests you, whether you're local, a mainlander, or anywhere else in the world, hit that subscribe button and make sure you don't miss a thing. Mahalo for joining me, and from Maui, this is Lahaina Lee saying aloha.